Welcome to Now That's Bass. I'm Pete Roythorne, and this is your weekly dose of bass insights. Thanks for joining us, and feel free to share your own insights and experiences in the comments. Joining me in the interview spotlight today is a bass player probably best known for his playing with James Morrison, but I also know he's played with Archive, Chris Difford and Glenn Tilbrook, and is currently performing bass duties with the ABBA Voyage stage show. On top of that, I have the great pleasure of depping for him in a particularly mad covers band. Welcome, Mr. Matt Round.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
So how's it going? How is the ABBA show going?
The ABBA show is absolutely amazing, to be honest. It's shrouded in a lot of secrecy, so I can't tell you too much. Apart from it's a bonkers, amazing concert.
Yeah,
I mean, I think to quote their tagline, it's a concert like no other. It's pretty unique. And then from my point of view, it's very much a gig. It's just like doing a tour, without having to move, which is quite nice.
And of course, you get to play those such an amazing cross section of bass lines.
Bonkers tunes, yeah. I mean, some of the parts are, and obviously I've gone well into the weeds on this, and digging around, and yeah, some of the note choices are utterly bonkers and utterly brilliant, and a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, have you got a favourite tune?
Yeah, for me it's always Eagle, but I think that is because obviously it was the opening track on that album, and it was one of the ones my mum had when I was a kid, so it's something I heard over and over again. So playing that, and it's a monster groove, and the percussion arrangement on it is utterly fantastic. So it's a really good fun moment.
So how this kind of links into what I want to talk about for the rest of the interview, but kind of connects with some of the things I want to touch on anyway. How did you land this? How did you get this gig?
Through knowing people, and then they put together some workshops. It's a really good way of kind of putting a band together, in fact, because rather than everyone going in individually and playing for 5 minutes and then saying yes or no, they got a bunch of us, a bunch of drummers, a bunch of bass players, blah blah blah, and just stuck us all in the room and sort of kept swapping and changing and found something that felt good. And that's what
was that quite intimidating?
No, it was kind of fun. It was a real sort of peer group, and it was a really nice hang. And it's I mean, I don't do a lot of the audition thing anymore, but they're a tricky and horrible thing. It's a bit like buying a house. If you're buying a pair of jeans, you'll spend hours in the shop trying on different ones, and you go and buy a house and you have to sort of choose in 15 minutes because someone else is waiting outside to look at it. Yeah. And I always feel the audition process a bit like that. You're going to spend 10 minutes with someone, and I've been on both sides of the fence with this, auditioning and auditioning. You spend 10 minutes with someone and decide if that's the person you want to play with for the next year. So this was a really nice, luxurious way of doing it. I mean, I guess they've got the time and the budget to do it like that and actually spend a couple of days really making sure this is a unit that works.
I mean, is there not a slight temptation in that if you're sat there with, I don't know how many other bass players there were, but if you've got, is there not a little bit of kind of professional jealousy kind of creeping in there in the background?
No, and I really don't think there can be. And I mean, without going too much down this rabbit hole, the audition process or whatever in our industry, getting a gig or not getting a gig, if you're someone that's gonna sit around and look on social media and go, oh, so and so's got that gig, why haven't I got that? Or he's doing that, why am I not doing that? Wrong game. Because for every gig you get, there's 100 you don't, and and you need to be pretty thick-skinned, and you need to take rejection well, and there's a million reasons to not get a gig. A lot more reasons than there is to get the gig. You can be the perfect player, but you're too tall, or there's all sorts of reasons. So you can't. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to be like that. You'll make yourself old very quickly, I think.
It's kind of interesting. I can't remember who I saw. Some clip came up on some social media channel. I was doom scrolling the other day, and it was an actor whose name I can't remember at the moment. But he was basically saying similar sort of thing. Is like, right. Yeah, you come into this industry, you have to be used to failure.
Yes, yeah.
I'm very comfortable with failing because, you know, exactly as you say, for every one audition, you'll not get 100.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we need to be slightly careful because I do see a lot of younger players sort of coming out of some of the schools where they've been told they're great, they're great, they're great, and not just talking about music here, talking about sort of life in general.
Yeah.
You know, I've got kids, and you see them sort of coming through school and being told you're great, you're the best, you're great, and then you come out and immediately don't get the gig or don't get the job, and people are kind of, you know, suffering with that. It's they're not used to the failure aspect of it, and I think it's quite an important part of life, and certainly of our industry. You know,
yeah, no, it's interesting. I think that that's kind of come up a couple of times. I think, and you just need to be, you need to be thick-skinned if you're going to come into this industry.
Yeah,
but not forget it.
I just think like the scenario we were just talking about with the Voyage auditions. You know, if they had have gone for one of the other players, that would have been because one of the other players was exactly what they were looking for, as opposed to what I offer. Also, I'm getting quite long in the tooth now. I do what I do, and I'm quite lucky that I've got to a point where people generally call me to do what I do.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I've definitely had calls over the years where people have called me for stuff, and I've said, no, I'm not your guy. You need to phone so-and-so. He's the guy you need for this, because, not saying that I don't adapt and change, but I've kind of got my area that I'm happy working in, and I think I'm good at working in. And that's what I want to do. That's what people generally want me to do. Which, yeah, it does take a little while to get to that point, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, very similar point came up, and actually, I'd be interested to know yesterday when I was interviewing somebody else. But do you think, therefore, I mean, obviously, you've got your niche, you've found your niche, you've found that little sweet spot that you sit in, and that's what you get hired for. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think people should have a niche, or do you think when you come out, you've just basically got to take everything?
Well, I think certainly to begin with, you probably got to take everything, because also the little niche that I sit in isn't the little niche I was aiming for when I was 18. I was all about the jazz funk thing, and I was quite into my jazz and that. And essentially, I've made a career playing songs, playing whole notes, you know.
Yeah.
And that's been, and I absolutely adore it, and I love where I am. But if I'd have been blinkered early on and said, no, I'm only doing this jazz thing that I'm really into, then I wouldn't have actually discovered these areas that I'm probably better at and enjoy more. So I'd say certainly, and you know, having said all that, I'm still open to sort of slightly left to centre phone calls and doing stuff that is a bit out of my comfort zone. Yeah, because that's fun. But I've definitely found that I've fallen into a sort of an area where I'm very happy. So
that's really cool. No, I'm you know, I think that's a really good thing to hear. I mean, because you do hear, I hear a lot of negativity. Well, not unpositivity. Let's say that rather than sort of specifically negativity, because there's always a positive angle. Because eventually, you know, ultimately, you're doing what you want to do, and you're playing music, which is an amazing thing to be doing. But yeah, no, it's great to hear that. Yeah, you know, somebody's kind of got into that spot where actually, yeah, no, you know what, I'm really happy and comfortable where I am. Thank you very much. Yeah, but let's kind of let's wind the clock back a little bit. So, where did your journey with bass start?
With bass specifically, I mean, I was very much into music. Not musical parents, but my mum would always put a record on as opposed to put the telly on. She was a huge consumer of music. So that's where I kind of got my love from, you know. And I mean, I remember the day John Lennon was shot, we didn't go to school because my mum was too upset to take us to school, and sort of trying to make that connection as a kid. Like, she didn't know this guy. Why is it so incredibly important to her? And that's sort of where the passion came from, I think. And then got a bit into tinkering with guitars, etc., etc. And then at school, I mean, I'm 6 foot something, and I've sort of been this height for a long time. So I wound up on double bass because I was the one big enough to play it.
The only one big enough to hold.
Yeah. So and that then led, obviously, all the kids at school started getting electric guitars, and it's like, right, a mate of mine's brother had an electric bass that I borrowed and then bought off him. That was utterly awful. And that was it, really. I've been stuck there ever since.
Did you? So did you go to college? Did you study music?
I
Or did you kind of
I
like,
did. So I came down. I'm from Essex originally. I came down to London to go to Thames Valley University. So in the very early '90s, and started a course there, which I didn't finish because I got too busy playing, and that seemed like the better route was to go and do gigs rather than sitting in class talking about gigs.
So how did that, when you say you were too busy, how did that come about? How did you get that? How did you go from being, a bass player in your school bands and things like that into, a working guy that's working so much that you just thought,
Well, I mean, the main thing I guess about coming to London, and the main thing I got from college, obviously I did learn some music at college, but the main thing I got from college was connections. I mean, and a lot of what people I still work with to this day, it was a real start of a network. And I was just, I mean, certainly in the first year of uni, I was in one particular band, just a blues, sort of boogie blues band, but we were doing 8 gigs a week, 2 Sunday residencies. We were playing, and they were those gigs where you do 3 hours a night, and you get your shit together.
Yeah.
And they were older guys, so it was great for me to sort of learn working with those guys, and so that went on, and then got involved with a signed artist on EMI when I was in the second year of studies, and that was obviously then full on busy.
So how did that come about? How did that materialize, I suppose?
Do you know what? I was trying to think about this the other day. I know it's through a drummer. I know it, and I can't actually for the life remember how the actual original connect came. As someone who knew someone said, try this guy out. Went to John Henry's, auditioned, and then that was it. And that was that was a full-time gig at that point. We're working a lot. We're making a record, and and that was a start of kind of working in that side of the industry, I guess.
Was there a point that you sat down and went, oh Christ, I can make this work as a living? I can actually, I can make this work as a career.
No, because there was never a point where I considered it wasn't going to be.
Oh really?
And that was much to my dad's disdain. It was for when they say get something to fall back on. It just I didn't need something to fall back on as far as I was concerned. The arrogance of youth.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel that I needed that. I like I say, not necessarily the way I thought the plan would go, but I knew the plan would go somewhere. And just didn't have enough interest in doing anything else. And I think that's quite important as well. I mean, I have real things sort of with our kids that I don't. They all play and stuff. I never tell them to practice because I think if you've got to tell someone to practice, it's probably not their jam.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it's like for you, but I struggle to walk past a bass or a guitar or the piano without just play. I can't walk past them. It's a fixation.
Yeah.
And 30 odd years in, it's still the same fixation. I can't leave it alone. So.
Well, I suppose I'm a funny one in that department because when I grew up, so I went to school. My dad played the clarinet. I mean, he was a very, very good amateur player. Kind of one of those things that he could have made the step up to being a professional if he put the time in. But he didn't, and he got distracted with work. And I think that's always been my thing. Is kind of like. I've always been slightly distracted by work, and I've found that if I'm playing a lot, so if I've got a lot of gigs coming up, then I'm playing constantly because it's there and I have to. Well, not because I have to, but it's there and it's there at the front of my mind, and I'm not being distracted by anything else. But sometimes I have gone, and I feel really bad about this. I have gone kind of like literally months without even touching a guitar.
Right.
I've just had periods of that, and then gone back to it and gone, oh, why didn't I why did I leave it alone? I mean, as you can see, it's slightly changed now because I'm kind of even sat with one.
Yes,
back
yeah.
But that's because I'm trying to put it as a thing that's kind of in the forefront of my life. So yeah, I think but yeah, I totally agree with you. If you're forcing somebody to get into something or to go down or to practice, then clearly, yeah, it isn't the right place to be. And certainly when I was a kid, when I was always in trouble at school for being the one kind of playing loud bass when I should have been kind of like doing my homework. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tricky one, I say, and the whole not having something to fall back on. I said before, like the arrogance of youth, with hindsight, possibly wasn't the smartest move. I've obviously been very, very lucky and got away with it, which is how I consider it. I'm still getting away with it after all these years.
well, yeah, that's interesting, because another thing I was going to ask you was, have you ever been in that situation where you've had complete imposter syndrome?
Yeah, kind of quite a lot, not in a bad way, but just, I mean, maybe not imposter syndrome, but definitely, that's I always feel like I'm getting away with it. It feels really lucky and a really amazing thing that and not saying it's all been plain sailing, but I've got to this part of my life and I've still not had to get a proper job, and that's kind of been I mean, the irony of that is I do sometimes wonder, because obviously I didn't get my degree. I started making connections. I went off and worked in the industry. Had I got my degree, I think there's possibly more of a chance that I wouldn't still be doing this, because I would have had a degree to possibly go and do something else. But because, I mean, my worth on paper, and obviously now getting into my 50s, if you look at me as a prospect for the real world, I'm useless. I've got nothing to offer whatsoever. I've never had a proper job. I've never really worked. I've got no degree, no official qualification. I'm stuck in this. This is now my only option, because it's sort of this, or I doubt I get a job as a bin man. Do you know what I mean? Because I've got no other skills to offer. Whereas I think if I had have had some official qualifications in the leaner times, the temptation to look at other avenues might have been there.
No, but I like that thing of sort of like it's basically the lack of a plan B, isn't it? There is there is no alternative. There is that. Does that ever get to the stage where it keeps you up at night though?
No, it doesn't. Certainly when I was younger, when we were first having kids and stuff, you start to think. But it has always worked out. That what took a while was getting used to the idea of, you do have those crazy busy periods, and then you're always going to have quieter periods. And it took me a long time to get into the idea of enjoying the quiet periods, because stressing doesn't make the phone ring. It just leaves you stressed. And what happens is, you sit around and you're stressed for a week or months or whatever it is, and then the phone rings and bang, you're gone again. So actually, in those weeks, cut the grass or do all that stuff that you've not done because you've been busy, and just enjoy that time, because touch wood, stuff does come up, and it always has done, and hopefully always will. So,
and I think I find that interesting, because it's I've been self-employed in non-music industry stuff for many years, and that feast and famine thing is. Feast or famine is very familiar. It's like It's like, you kind of you kind of almost want music as an industry to be different, but it isn't. It's exactly the same. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, it's exactly the same as any other industry or any other business that you're going to be doing.
From the business side of it, absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Except the fact that you have the advantage about playing.
It's thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting mind shift in a way, is I think, there is a dangerous temptation, as you say, when people are younger, to come out thinking like, oh yeah, I'm just going to get signed in a big band and this is going to happen. But the reality is that doesn't happen.
Yeah, or if it does, even if it does, it's a finite thing. You might have a couple of great years off that, and then you'll be spat out at the other end, and you need to find ways to work.
Yes, exactly. I mean, how many times have we seen people get into bands and then be dropped sort of 2 years later?
Or it just runs its course. It's there's very few. I've been lucky. I've had a couple of sort of longer term gigs. I mean, with James Morrison, I've been with him 15 years now, so that's been a long one. But yeah, they are few and far between things that last that long. So you just there's always going to be an element of what's next, and it's also kind of exciting.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, that is kind of something that it's that thing that keeps you on the edge. But that, and I think to me, it's a really important piece of advice that you need to learn to enjoy the quiet times and have some sort of confidence that those quiet times will end.
Yeah. And like I say, stressing will never make the phone ring. So it doesn't make any difference. You might as well just enjoy it,
And have you got? Do you have any sort of like, if you are in that situation, and the phone's not ringing, do you? And it doesn't ring for a prolonged period. I mean, let's not talk about COVID because that's a blot on the landscape that I don't think we need to go into particularly. Yeah. But do you have anything that you kind of do if things seem to be dragging on? Do you kind of like pick up the phone and phone round all your mates? Do you go out and sort of network with people? Do you?
Not especially. Although conversely, I guess the time, especially because I've been doing a lot of touring over the years, so it's when I would come back from a tour. That's generally when you wind up phoning up all your mates going, "Hey, I'm back for a bit. Let's go eat Indian food and have a pint." Yeah. Not necessarily so that I can remind you that I need a gig. Yeah. But actually, conversely, it possibly works like that because it's like, "Hey guys, I'm not the best networker. I feel I've never been very good at the sort of calculated networking thing." But I do love seeing my mates for a curry and a beer. So if that and the nature of what we do, most of my mates are in the industry. So I guess that does adversely happen.
Yeah, that's kind of quite interesting because again, this networking thing and contacts is something that keeps cropping up in the interviews that I'm doing. And as you say, I'm similar to you. It's like networking. It's not. I'm not great at that. But that idea of just like going out with my mates for a curry or a beer is kind of like that I can do. But I suppose the thing is, what I need to do therefore is cultivate the mates that are in the industry.
Yes, I guess, yeah. It's a tricky one, that, and it's not one I've ever really had an answer to. Just touch wood, the phone will ring. That's kind of
But the thing is, it has done.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, do you get? I know. So, talking about kind of things like promoting yourself and that networking and stuff. Do you go down the social media route? Have you bought into this?
I'm dreadful at it. Absolutely dreadful. I actually didn't have any for a long time, and it was different. Mark at Ashdown, wonderful company, wonderful people. He's great. I've known him a lot of years, and Dan, his son, who now runs things, who I've known since he was a baby. And it was those guys that sort of lent on me and said, you sort of know how this works these days. That's how we sell stuff, and hence me having a Instagram feed of pictures of amplifiers. But that's I do get it. That's how it works these days. You need to let people know, and they've been a great company. They've been lovely to me over the years. So I'm very happy to do that sort of stuff for them. So I'm not great at that. I totally understand. It's a very different world and a very different industry now. So for younger guys coming into the game, I think that's your calling card. I used to have little business cards I used to give to people at gigs, but now this is what you do. This is the that's the way you promote yourself, I think, and because everyone has access to that, self promotion, I guess you've got to play the game a little bit. If I'm honest, I'm sort of glad I missed those times.
Yeah. But I can see it's interesting you say that if you're getting pressured. So I'm assuming who are your endorsees, or who you endorsed by?
Literally Ashdown. I've been with them over 20 years. I'm not a big fan. But I know a lot of people that will sort of jump ship because they've been offered a slightly different deal with a better company, blah, blah, blah. I can hand on my heart say if Ashdown didn't help me with stuff, I'd go into a store and buy their stuff.
Right.
Like I'm not going to use an amp I don't like as much because someone's offering me a great deal on it and they're going to put me on a poster or some shit like that. I've got a pile of them in here. I love their amps, so they're what I use. I'm lucky enough that they help me with that. Beyond that, because instrument wise, I mainly use old stuff. So obviously there's not really endorsement scenarios for that. There's a couple of great builders. There's a guy, Tino Tedesco, who's a Swiss builder. I've got a couple of his floating around. He makes absolutely stunning instruments. I don't know if you can see the finish on this as well, the way he's got the translucent.
Yeah. That's very cool.
Actually, so it's super light, and he modelled the neck on this on my jazz bass there. So he's made me a couple, and then the guys at Sandberg have made me a couple of basses for the Voyage show.
Oh, nice.
Which are, in fact, I have the spare here.
I have to say,
everything's black, so these are.
I have to say, I do like a Sandberg, and I do like a matching headstock.
Yeah, well, these don't have matching headstocks.
Yeah, but I know the Tedesco one did. That's really nice.
The Tino does. And these are his super lights, so they're for an old man, they're ridiculously comfortable to play.
Yeah.
Sound absolutely awesome. The only mod I've had on this is I've had active put there instead of passive because I actually prefer it as a passive instrument.
Yeah.
It plays so nicely just as a kind of straight up jazz bass. Yeah. So that's them. But so they have helped me with them. But apart from that, I don't really. I keep saying that. I mean, MXR actually just very kindly sent me some bits as well. I use the MXR, the Bass DI Plus. Is it the 800? Always used it. I've got them on all my boards. I think they're great bits of kit. So.
Awesome, yeah. So I just to kind of, I'm starting to kind of think about wrapping this up a little bit. So one thing I did want to ask you is like, where would you suggest people focus so let's say the three most important areas that you think people should focus their attention when it comes to kind of like wanting to improve gigging chances?
I think I can narrow it down to two.
Okay.
And I would say, it feels like I stated the obvious, be good, but always be good. So you might be, I see people, let's say you've got a scenario where you're playing with a band and the drummer's not great.
Yeah.
Which is a slog as a bass player.
Yeah.
You've got two options there. You just muddle along, or you go, how do I make this drummer sound better? How do I puff out my chest and make this drummer the best he can be? Because... and the thing with always playing, you never know who's watching. So if you're having a shit night and there's someone there or someone knows someone, that's not going to do you any favours. All of my gigs, and obviously, I do come from sort of the pre-social days. All of my work has come from playing with people and people liking what I do and then recommending me for something else. And I think that's still how a lot of it works. You get a call to go and dep on a gig, and there's another dude on that gig who knows about someone that's looking for a bass player for something. That's how it works. And you don't know when those opportunities are.
No.
So the rule of thumb is just always be good. Always be the best you can be on the gig. And if the gig's shit or if the gig's £50 in the corner of a pub or whether it's, an arena show, I think there's no room for a B game. Yeah. A game all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other one is don't be a dick. Be a decent human, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
especially when you're talking about getting into the higher levels of work and things like touring and stuff. You're not just playing bass with someone for 90 minutes every night. You're living with them, you're traveling with them, you're hanging with them. And I've seen enough situations over the years where you've got two guys up for the job, playing ability absolutely both brilliant. But one's a nice hang, that's the guy that's going to work and keep working. And conversely, I've seen people fall by the wayside because of personality traits. And I'm not just talking about, being an arsehole or whatever, being late, being shoddy with things, not replying to emails or question, your basic admin of life. All that stuff needs to be good, because if you're, and obviously, I work as a musical director on stuff as well, or if you're a tour manager, the guy that never replies to the emails.
Oh God, yeah.
It's stuff like that. Just being a good rounded human being.
That's basic professionalism.
I think it is, but I think there's a slight element, because of this sort of airy fairy artistic thing that we do, that there are people that think they can get away with, being a bit, I'm a bit. And it's,
in a way, that kind of ties nicely back into something else that I'm saying, is like, if you're going into music, it's not an airy fairy thing. It's like, it may be creative, but that doesn't give you any excuse for not treating it like any job and being professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And the lateness thing. There's you turn up half an hour late to rehearsals, for example. That's 5 guys that were there on time who could have been at home or had one more coffee or something. I find it utterly rude and disrespectful. It happens once in a while. People's trains get cancelled or whatever. But that one guy that don't worry about him. He's always late. I have not a lot of tolerance for, because it's just
no.
So I think just generally be a decent human, as you would in any walk of life, because it does make a difference.
So I'm going to take you back to something you kind of alluded to there, because a mutual drumming friend of ours suggested that this would be a good type of question to introduce. So you talk about drummers. What do you look for in a drummer when you get, if you're doing a gig or something like that, and you talk, you say there if the drummer's shit, but actually, what do you look for that makes a good drummer?
I mean, there's the obvious, like good solid timekeeping, yada yada, and then there's pocket. But most importantly, and I'd say this isn't just for drummer. This is as much for us and all other instruments. Is ears, is listening to what the music you're playing and what other people are doing. It's all, if you talk about drummers, it's all well and good having some crazy chops, but if they're cutting across vocals or just not suiting the music, then that to me is as bad as being out of time. It's about listening and playing the sonata, and that's going back to sort of talking about how adaptable we are, but that's where we need to be adaptable. If we're playing a certain kind of music, it's got to be right. I mean, I've got a few days back on Voyage now, and then I'm out with Chris Difford on Sunday.
Okay.
And I'll probably play more notes in every ABBA song than I will on the whole of Chris's gig. But I can't go into Chris's gig with my ABBA head on.
Yeah.
Because that would be utterly wrong. And it feels like I'm stating the obvious, but it's surprising how often people miss that. And the other thing, sort of going back to getting gigs and being the right player, I think a mistake I see with a lot of people is that they're trying to impress. Essentially, unless we're going down that kind of Marcus Miller or Victor Wooten kind of path, we don't play an impressive instrument. We play a supportive instrument. And I'm going to be way more impressed. If I'm watching a band, I'm going to be way more impressed seeing a bass player that's not playing too much, but is gluing this thing together and making everything feel great, than some dude that's got chops. And especially from my mindset, I don't love that kind of thing as much anyway. But and the people that matter will notice that. You don't need to do something fancy for everyone to go, oh, he's a great bass player. People in the audience might not notice it. People in the audience will go, that was a great gig. And I'm fine with that. I don't need people to walk out going, he was an excellent bass player. I want people to walk out and go, that was an excellent band. That sounded good. I don't care about them noticing me particularly. And I think if anyone's looking at musicians and looking at a band that is worth their salt, they're going to spot that. And actually, anything people are trying to do to stand out is going to be a minus point.
Do you know what that reminds me? I think one of the greatest compliments I feel I had as a bass player was when I came off at the end of a gig, and a bass player from one of the other bands came up to me and he went, "Oh man, how do you do that?" He said, you know, you just sit there and you're just playing this stuff, and it's really kind of like you're not trying to show off how good you are and all that kind of thing. And okay, well, yeah, that's just playing for the song. And he was going, oh, that's great, because it's just like, you know, he was going, I just have this overbearing urge constantly to kind of like just show people how good I am. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, that's probably because I'm about 25 years older than you as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a mileage thing. I mean, I feel there's you know, as a kid learning to play, there's an arc, because you have to learn all this shit, and then more importantly, you have to learn when not to do it.
Yeah.
You know, you need chops. Of course, you need chops, but it's lesson 2 is the important lesson, is learning when not to use them.
Yeah. The space rather than the filler.
Yes, yeah, and I get way more excited over someone getting the note length right against the fade of a snare than I do someone playing fast. You know, that to me is way more important.
Yeah. No, impressive. No, I like that. So, two more questions left. The first one is, if you were sat next to Little Matt now, just as he was first picking up his first bass, or in your case, first standing behind some massive double bass, what would your advice be?
Oh, I don't know. I think just roll with it. Yeah. Just go where it takes you, because I probably wasted. Did I waste? But maybe wasted some energy when I was younger. You know, trying to get into areas of music that maybe didn't want me or weren't the right things. And also I just tell myself, you know, what we were talking about earlier, relax in the quiet bits, because that's definitely something I've wasted energy on as a younger man, you know, panicking about, is this it? Will I never work again? It's all over. The phone's not rung in a fortnight. I'm doomed. I'm going to be a milkman. Yeah. And actually just to relax into that I would definitely, tell myself.
Yeah. Take it easy. Go with the flow. I like that.
Yeah.
And so, last question then. If there was one bass line everyone should learn, what is it?
That's such a tricky one, especially talking about what we've just been talking about, as in...
Yeah, well, that's why I thought it might be quite an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, I had that in my mind, sort of thing that I heard Good Vibrations on the radio this morning. So Carol Kaye's up the octave part at the top of that, and the fact it's so beautifully melodic. It's coming off the fifth of the chord, as opposed to obviously, you know, playing the one at the top of it. You know, it's more akin to a horn part or something like that, you know, than a bass part. So I think that's a wonderful little exploration of melody. Apart from that, I mean, you could always say, you know, the end section of the chain or something like that, where you've got a hook. I mean, almost to the point you can you play an open A, your head starts playing that part. You know, it's to have written something like that.
Yeah.
But but then for me, some of the greatest bass parts are whole notes. You know, but a whole note that cuts off at exactly the right point or something like that. They're the sort of nuances that excite me more and more. You know.
Cool. All right, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
It's been a really entertaining conversation, actually. Just on the point of the chain, actually, I was with Smiley. We did a gig on Friday night.
Oh, great.
We played the chain, and because he was playing acoustic, we didn't play the end bit. And
oh no!
Like,
right,
how can you play the chain without playing that?
I'll phone him now and have a word, because that's not okay.
Sorry, mate. Listen,
that's the money shot.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, listen. Thank you so much for your time. Really entertaining
Pleasure, Pete.
conversation. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Take care, mate. Bye bye.